Alright, so for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Midwest Bulldogs. Now, the model number for this is MWT-6716B, the B standing for Bulldogs. Now, if you are unfamiliar with what a pair of Bulldogs is, they are basically a pair of snips that can cut through some thick gauge metal. Now, your standard red and green can normally cut through metal up to 22 gauge. Now, when you get to 22 gauge with a normal pair of snips, it's definitely a little bit of a challenge, but you can do it. But when it comes to cutting through, 20 gauge and 18 gauge sheet metal, or just metal in general, your standard snips aren't going to be able to do it. So that's where these guys come in. Now, I believe the max on this specific pair of snips is 18 gauge is the max that these can cut through. So if you're working with some 18 or 20 gauge metal, this is mainly what they are meant for. Now, what I use them for is cutting through drives and cutting through standing S and S cleat, mainly cutting through S cleat and standing S, which if you're unfamiliar with what standing S is, it's just basically a beefed up version of just normal S cleat. It goes on ductwork that's 24 inches and bigger. It just kind of makes the ductwork a lot more rigid compared to just standard S cleat. So that's what I mainly use this tool to cut through. Now, as you can see on the front here, the cutting edge is a lot smaller than on a traditional pair of snips, and that is to give you more leverage to go ahead and cut through that thicker material. So that is why that is like that. Now, if you are unfamiliar or familiar with Midwest, you know that they do have a nice comfort grip kind of handle on their, pretty much almost all of their tools have the same style of grip. Now, I like the placement of these little nubs right here, especially if you use this tool right-handed. I feel like it just fits real well in the hand. Right here, and especially when you're cutting through metal. Now, I also like that Midwest has this nice lock here that keeps the tool closed when it's in either in your pocket or it's in your bag. You don't really have to worry about it springing open. Sometimes these screws can become a little loose, and all you gotta do is just take a Torx head. I believe it's a T20. It could be a T25. I'm not too sure on that, but all you gotta do is just take a Torx head and just tighten it back up if it becomes loose. But that does the lock on here just does a great job holding the tool closed, and the tool does open and close fairly nicely. You can see that right there. And one thing to note about these Bulldogs is that if you're using them outside and they do get wet, the spring can become a little bit stiff. So with that, all you have to do is put some oil on there and just move the handles around on the tool. Just kind of work that the lubricant in there, or work the oil on in there, and they open right back up and they cut fairly smooth. So that's pretty much it for the detail. Now, the handles do have the Midwest website on them, and then also have, made in the USA since 1945 on them. Now, you can see this tool has been used quite a bit. This is my second pair of these snips. I think it took me maybe 2 years to go through one pair of these. And that was cutting through a bunch of material with them. It wasn't just, cutting through a piece here and there. For a while, when I first got into commercial, I was using them on a daily basis, cutting up a bunch of standing S and a bunch of S cleat for jobs that we were doing. So I wore those out fairly quickly. And you can generally tell when a pair of snips is, wearing out. They don't cut as clean. And then when you also take a look at the cutting edge on the tool, you can kind of see that parts of it are folded over. And then when you get to that part, or you're cutting metal and you get to that part on the shear itself, it just is a pain to go ahead and cut through. So that's kind of why I decided to replace these. I still have my old pair, actually. They float around in my van. But they're just kind of a backup pair at this point in case something happens to these, or I lose these, or I give them to someone and they walk off the job. I have a backup pair of these just sitting around. So now we'll go ahead and zoom out here, and we'll go ahead and cut through some material here. Now, you generally aren't going to use these to cut through some sheet metal, because you're going to have to make a lot of cuts to go ahead and get through this, whereas just, your standard pair of reds are going to blow through this really easy. And that's because you have that short cutting edge on here. But if you needed to cut through some material, you could easily do that. But remember, it's not the greatest for cutting through this material, but you can cut through it. So if these are all you had, you need to cut some sheet metal, you could. Now the one thing you kind of have to watch out for is you can see every one of those little dimples. That's when you close the pair of snips down all the way, and that kind of leaves what we call a fish hook on there. So if you happen to run your finger accidentally across there, that's 9 times out of 10 going to catch your finger. So this is just 26 gauge metal. They blew through it without an issue. Like I said, they're mainly meant for that larger material or that thicker gauge material. So right here we have just a standard drive right here. Now oftentimes when we get ductwork, the shop sends out drives that are pretty much the right size for the ductwork, but sometimes they're just so swamped they just kind of send you out what they have. So sometimes you get drives that are longer than what you need. So I like to use my snips to go ahead and just cut through the drive without any resistance there. Now I can use a pair of reds, but it is a little bit more challenging to do, and it's definitely not as easy to do, whereas the Bulldogs just go right through it without an issue, and it's a lot more comfortable on the hand to go ahead and cut through that. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to cut through this on here. Generally when you're cutting through some standing S or some S-cleat, you can see it is quite thick material, and generally I use my hip to push down on one of the handles of the pliers to go ahead and cut through this. So I don't think I'm going to try and attempt to cut through this S-cleat right here for today's video, but that is pretty much the Midwest Bulldogs. Definitely a valuable tool to have, especially if you're cutting through, like I said, you're cutting through a lot of standing S or a lot of S-cleat. These are definitely a wonderful tool to have. Couldn't highly recommend them enough. With that being said, that's all I have for this video. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. And if you're wanting more information on this tool, I will have a link to Midwest's website in the description. It'll take you right over to the product page for these. You can learn maybe some more information about them, or you can find a retailer that does carry them. But with that being said, that's all I have for this video.